Community Connections, CKMS. Local sounds, thoughts, passions, and success. Celebrate local, your neighbor's got a story to tell. Community Connections, CKMS.
Happy Monday, Waterloo Region. This is CKMS Community Connections for Monday, the 14th of July, halfway through the month already. We've got Tamara Lorincz in the studio today. I'm going to speak with Tamara about world affairs just a few minutes. I want to start off with Michael Darcy from his new album, Homemade. This is called Will You Come Over the Mountain?
One night when the moon illumined the sky, I first took a notion to marry. So I put on my hat and away I did hie. I would swear I was in a great hurry, till I came to a spot where often I'd been. My heart gave a jump when my darling I'd seen. I opened the door and bid her good night, saying, will you come over the mountain? What kind of a foot has come over you now? But I'm glad to see you so merry. 'Tis now 12 o'clock, you should be in bed, but come in or you'll waken me, mammy. If you think I am jesting, my jesting is true. I've courted 12 months and I think that should do. And before I go home, I'll be married to you, if you come with me over the mountain. Well, if I was to make an elopement with you, I'm sure to be wrought with great danger. The neighbours would tattle and cackle us all, and my friends they would gaze on and wonder. Let them all tattle or cackle away. Consult with yourself, for it's very near day, and I don't give a rap what a lot of them say, if you come with me over the mountain. But I must away now, it's home I must go. I think it is fitting and better. So farewell, my darling, farewell for a while, and this'll put an end to the matter. Oh, wait just a minute till I put on my shoes. My heart gave a leap when I heard the glad news. She came to the door, saying maybe I'll choose to come with you over the mountain. By this time the moon had sunk in the west. 'Twas the dawn of a bright summer's morning, and off we did go. The pair of us went for the wedding, our two hearts are pining. Saugerty came without more delay. He married us both on the very same day, and it's often we talk when we've nothing to say of the trip we took over the mountain.
Michael Darcy, his new album called Homemade. Michael was in the studio with us in March. Nice to have new music by Michael Darcy. In the studio with me is Tamara Lorincz. Hi, Tamara. How are you doing?
Hi, it's so nice to be here, Bob. It's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
You're telling me about your dissertation just now.
Yes, I am a PhD candidate at the Balsillie School of International Affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University, and I am finishing up my very long dissertation, and it links climate change and geopolitics, and so many of the themes of my dissertation relate to the conversation that I know we would like to have today, so I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Last time you spoke, we had just come off the F-35 fighter rally in Uptown Waterloo. That's a year and a half ago now. I guess the good news is that those fighter jets still haven't been purchased, but that's probably about the only good news that there is.
Well, actually, we did make an announcement in January of 2023 that Canada is planning on buying 88 F-35 fighter jets. These are the Lockheed Martin stealth fighters for a cost of $19 billion. But the life cycle cost, we know from the Parliamentary Budget Office, will be $74 billion. And what the plan is for Canada to buy these 88 fighter jets in 3 tranches, in waves. So we're expecting actually the first about 15 to come sometime perhaps next year or the year after. We have fighter jet pilots that are training in the United States right now on these jets, and then we're expecting the fleet to come up to our largest Air Force base, which is in Cold Lake, Alberta. So there are infrastructure demands that have been underway in Bagotville, Quebec, which is one of our major Air Force bases, as well as in Cold Lake, Alberta, which is our largest, busiest Air Force base. So unfortunately, Canada is planning on still buying these fighter jets. Now, there has been some controversy about buying these fighter jets because they are very costly and they are still very much controlled by the United States. So the systems on these fighter jets are extremely complex. The technical navigation and control systems, the weapon systems, they are running on extremely sophisticated software that has been developed by Lockheed Martin, and Canada does not have the knowledge and the skills to be able to do the maintenance that will be required for this. So it will mean that the Lockheed Martin will have, and the U.S. government will have effective, control over these fighter jets, and this is causing a concern among Canadians because many Canadians want to have greater sovereignty and distance from the U.S. administration now that it's under President Trump, and rightly so. Canadians should be asking serious questions about these fighter jets, and it's still possible. It's still not too late for Canada to say, no, we want to cancel this procurement. We don't want to go through with the F-35s because they're costly, they're carbon intensive, they are terrible planes. I mean, they're just poorly made. They still have 800 open deficiencies. They're not even at full production. They've been in development for 25 years. They're a bad warplane, and there's a great risk to our finances, public funding, because the sustainment costs and operational costs are so high that Canadians won't be able to afford these. We're going to have to cut so many social programs to be able to continue to fund these warplanes. And this is really a serious issue. And I'll just say that in the United States, in the Senate, there has been hearings on the fact that Congress people are concerned about the sustainment costs on the F-35. So
that's their own sustainment costs.
Their own sustainment costs. The F-35 fighter jet is the costliest weapons program in human history. It is now estimated to cost $1.7 trillion over the life cycle of these fighter jets. So for Canada, it will be at least $74 billion over the life cycle, over the next 30 to 40 years, let alone the climate impacts of these fighter jets.
Yeah.
And so Canadians should be standing up and opposing this, putting pressure on their elected officials to say, we don't want to be investing in fossil fuel powered fighter jets that are designed to fight other countries. We want to be investing in things like high speed rail and housing.
Yeah. These sustainment costs, a lot of that, well, all of that is really going straight into the United States, isn't it? Because they're the only ones that are manufacturing the parts. They're the only ones distributing the parts for the F-35s.
Well, they are the ones that are assembling and building these fighter jets. So we don't have plants that are building the entire plane. We do have some suppliers that are building components. Like even here in Kitchener-Waterloo, there is a company, Centra, that is supplying components, and there are many other manufacturers in the aerospace and defense sector that are building little components, for these fighter jets and other U.S. weapon systems. And this was, of course, very strategic on the part of this defense consortium that was established 30 years ago to build this fifth generation fighter jet between, Canada, the United States, and some other NATO allies. There was a consortium of countries that came together to plan to build a new fighter jet, and they put little parts of the building of these fighter jets in different countries in order to secure the commitment, to buy these fighter jets. But the prime contractor, is Lockheed Martin, is a private American weapons manufacturer, and in fact it is the largest weapons manufacturer on planet Earth, and it actually has the final control over these planes. Even some of the code, some of the technical aspects of this plane, the Pentagon doesn't even have control over. So this F-35, I have been saying for 15 years, is a boondoggle. It is going to be costly, out of control, exacerbate the climate crisis, risk a nuclear war, because it's actually been designed to carry the B-6112 tactical nuclear weapon. This warplane should be cancelled. Canada should not buy it, get out of the development consortium, and just walk away from this fighter jet.
So these things, which are really a computer with wings and a person inside, they've got they can turn off the software remotely. So Lockheed Martin can decide, or the U.S. government can decide, we no longer want Canada to be flying these things, and just deactivate the planes by remote control.
Well, that might be possible. That absolutely might be possible. But the other thing is, we don't have the kind of sovereign control that we should have over this fighter jet in terms of the technical, the software aspects of it. But the other problem of this F-35 is that it is a single engine warplane, and so it puts it at a greater risk of crashing because there's only one engine, and especially flying these warplanes over an area like the Arctic, which is what is planned for this fighter jet, where there are very few runways and this kind of thing. There is a great crash risk for these F-35s. And so this is another issue that we need to talk about, because the F-35 will be stationed at an Air Force base in Cold Lake, Alberta, which is actually on stolen Indigenous land. There are three Dene Cree reserves right around this Air Force base. And so, I quite frankly am concerned about these Indigenous communities. I've been up there 3 times to look at this Air Force base, and we've got our CF-18s, our current fleet of fighter jets, flying low over these Indigenous communities every day. They're so loud, they're so noisy. The F-35s are even louder, and they are a crash risk. So in all aspects, Canadians should be concerned about this fighter jet and should say, we've got to cancel this procurement.
Are there any F-35s in active service?
They're not in the Canadian fleet right yet. No, they are planning to come either next year or the year after, the first tranche of F-35s. But they are being used right now by the United States. I understand that the airstrikes that the United States conducted with the B-2 of the Iranian nuclear sites, that fighter jets flew alongside the B-2 bombers. So I suspect that the F-35s, and this was the impression that I was given when I was listening to the announcement by the Pentagon, that the F-35s were involved in that airstrike. And as well, the Israelis have been using the F-35s to bomb Gaza. And Gaza, it's just been this horrendous genocide on this defenseless population. They are dropping from these F-35s, 1,000-pound, 500,000-pound bombs on the people. It's just terrible.
Yeah, so indirectly, through these parts manufacturing assembly plants here in Canada, Centra amongst them, Canada is complicit in the genocide in Gaza.
Canada is deeply complicit in the genocide in Gaza, not just by supplying components to the F-35s that the United States is sending to Israel, but we are sending, and have been for many decades, millions and millions of dollars of weapon systems to Israel. So people can go and have a look at Global Affairs Canada, their website, and there's reports that come out almost every other year called the Export of Military Goods Report. And you can see in that report that millions of dollars of Canadian weapons are being exported to Israel. So in the past, we have sent things like sniper rifles, different types of guns to Israel. And what has Israel been doing with those guns and ammunition? Killing Palestinians, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And so Canadians should be very, very concerned that we have been complicit in this Israeli genocide that's unfolding in Gaza and the settler violence that we're seeing in the West Bank, but also in this apartheid and illegal occupation of Palestinian territories for decades. So Canadians need to confront the fact that we have been engaged in war crimes and crimes against humanity by virtue of our military support of Israel.
And this is directly contradictory to some of the legislation or laws that Canada has passed or become a signatory to.
Yes, that's right. So in 2019, Canada joined the Arms Trade Treaty, and under that arms trade treaty, Canada is not supposed to be supplying weapons to any country that is involved in human rights violation. Well, Israel is the state extraordinaire of human rights violations, and Canada has been supplying weapons to Israel for a very, very long time. But not only are we giving military support to Israel, but we're also giving a lot of moral and public support to Israel. And, we continue to have the Israel-Canada Free Trade Agreement. We continue to have, our embassy in Israel. And if we really want to sanction Israel in terms of expressing our condemnation of this genocide, there's a lot of things that Canada should be doing. We should be like what Colombia and other countries have done, with withdrawing our ambassador, closing our embassy, cutting off the arms to Israel, canceling the free trade agreement, sanctioning Netanyahu and all of the other leaders in Israel that are supporting this genocide. I mean, we're talking about a genocide. I mean, there are 62,000 Palestinians that have been killed in Gaza. There are now 42,000 orphan children. There are 500 civilians that have been detained.
Those are just the published numbers.
Those are just the published numbers. That's right. And millions, 1.5 million people displaced from the north into the south. They are killing people at aid stations every single day. They've been starving the population since March. And what has Canada done in the face of all of this? Nothing. They are killing doctors. They've destroyed all of the schools and the universities. I mean, it breaks my heart thinking as a PhD student that all of the universities and schools and libraries have been destroyed in Palestine. I mean, it's just absolutely egregious and heartbreaking. And what has Canada done, for instance, when the United States just announced that the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, is now being sanctioned by the United States for releasing a report that says that there are companies that are profiting from this genocide and that needs to stop. Canada should be defending her, standing up and defending her. And we should be listening to her recommendations in the report and start arming and supporting an Israeli genocide against the Palestinians.
I'm not sure of the exact terminology, but I think the International Court of Justice has arrest warrants out for 2 high-ranking Israeli officials, possibly Netanyahu, definitely some in the war cabinet. And I don't believe Canada is willing to act on that.
Yes, so it's not the International Court of Justice, it's the International Criminal Court that has announced arrest warrants for alleged crimes against humanity and war crimes against members of the Israeli government, including Netanyahu. So Israel, the United States, are not parties to the International Criminal Court, so they are not accepting jurisdiction. But Canada is a member of the International Criminal Court by virtue of our ratification of the Rome Statute 25 years ago. And we were very supportive in the establishment of the International Criminal Court. And finally, the ICC did make the right decision to, seek the prosecution of Israel. They have actually, for the past 2 decades, been very hesitant to pursue charges against Israel because of this intense pressure from the United States and Israel. So the previous chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Bensouda, she was faced sanctions when she started to try to investigate war crimes by Israel, and now there's a lot of sanctions by the United States and Israel against the International Criminal Court because they don't want to see the prosecution of Israel. Right. But Canada, as a supporter of the International Criminal Court, can exert jurisdiction if, for instance, Netanyahu were to come to our country and turn him over to the court. So this is definitely something that Canada should do.
I don't think there's the will on either side of the House of Commons. I don't believe neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives would be willing to enforce something like that.
No, the Liberals and the Conservatives have supported the apartheid terrorist state of Israel for many decades, like I said, by supplying weapons and by providing different types of financial and moral support to Israel. For instance, we have been able to subsidize Israeli Zionist charitable organizations in Canada that have in turn funded the Israeli Defense Forces. This is an example of the financial support for the Israeli occupation and this Israeli violence against the Palestinians. And like I said, by the fact that we've been exporting weapons to Israel for so long under both conservative and liberal governments. And even when Prime Minister Trudeau, just before he stepped down, one of the last things he said in a press conference is, "I am a Zionist." And then recently we know from a press conference from Prime Minister Carney, he said that a new Palestinian state should be a Zionist state. So making these kinds of claims just shows that the Liberals are very much supporting Israel, and this is exactly what we see across the aisle by the Conservatives. And the NDP is a little bit better, but they really have not been standing up for Palestinian rights the way that they should be. In fact, it took them about 3 weeks after October 7th to call for a ceasefire, for instance. And then we know provincially how the NDP's position has been really terrible.
Yeah. You're speaking here of Sarah Jama, who was essentially removed from caucus based on some comments she made supporting Palestine.
That's right. The member of the legislature, Sarah Jama, the NDP member from Hamilton, she was censured by just after October 7th, when she said that there needs to be a ceasefire, we need to stop sending weapons to Israel, we need to call for a peaceful resolution. She wanted to wear her keffiyeh in the legislature, and the NDP provincially removed her from the caucus. This is absolutely shameful. So, but what we see provincially is it's terrible. And what we've seen federally, for instance, from the foreign affairs critic Heather McPherson, she has definitely been better. But like I said, the NDP needed to be pushed to take the right stand and call for a ceasefire, an arms embargo, and but it's required members in the party and the public to push them in the right direction.
NDP federally is in a bit of turmoil at the moment, going through a leadership selection process. Do you think that the question of independence of Palestine will be an influencing factor in choosing a leader?
Absolutely. I think that the NDP's position on Palestine, which is better than the Conservatives and Liberals, will attract people to support the leadership race. I think that there are many Canadians that will be paying more attention to this campaign for a new leader in the NDP because they're seen as an alternative. And I think that this is an opportune time for Canadians maybe to get involved in the NDP and to push the people who are going to be running for the leadership, to push them in the right direction, because that's what's going to be required. So people should pay attention to that race. And I've heard that Eve Engler, who is a well-known activist and author and who has been working very hard to support Palestinian rights, he publishes prolifically and takes many very courageous stands. He has just announced his plan to run for the leadership of the NDP and to challenge Heather McPherson, but we're actually expecting, other people to step forward to run in that race. So it will be a very interesting race to follow. And of course, I'm very supportive of Eve Engler, and because I know that he is right on the most important issues. He is committed to peace, he's committed to justice, he's committed to a Canadian foreign policy that's truly based on international law and human rights and taking action on climate and sustainable development. So in ways that we just don't see from Heather McPherson and the old guard of the NDP.
I haven't seen much in mainstream media about the NDP leadership race, not in the CBC, not in some of the alternative media like the Tyee or the Narwhal.
Well, I really think that there has been in the past 5 years a narrowing in the public discourse that we've seen from mainstream media, and so much of our media is corporate controlled. So the debate is very limited, and any type of ideas, people, views that are more radical or progressive or divergent from this very limited dominant mainstream media position, they just are ignoring. Yeah. And so it's a huge problem. So this is why radio stations like yourself and independent media are really so important, because we need to hear alternative views, because our country and this world is in a very serious crisis, and we need people who are speaking up for peace and for justice and for human rights, genuinely.
Yeah, a small station like CKMS, Radio Waterloo, entirely volunteer-based. We could really use more assistance, especially from people who have some journalistic experience to help us out doing reportage like that. From a local perspective, of course. I mean, we don't expect people to travel internationally to gather news for CKMS, but there's lots of stuff happening locally that we could certainly use a better view on from our own radio station. Speaking of local events, were you at the Palestine Day yesterday?
Well, do you know that I helped promote it, and I have been very supportive of the Palestinian youth movement, and very supportive of all of the Palestinian events. I try to go to many of the rallies that I can, but I am under an intense deadline with my dissertation, so I was actually at my university office all day. But I put up posters around downtown and around around the university, and I was very, very supportive of it. I did attend last year, and there
were some very powerful presentations by Shatta and Fufu, who were on AWOL Radio a few months ago. AWOL Radio is one of the shows that we have Friday afternoons. It was an incredible, a very large event. King Street was shut off. There's food tents and information booths and vendors all up and down King Street, and music presentations on a stage on Carl's Air Square, and then two very, very powerful presentations by Shatta and Fufu on the effects of the genocide since October the 7th, a before and after map, not life-size maps, but maps that were, 20 meters in length on the stage there, to show the effects that the October 7th and the events since then have had on Gaza. Very, very powerful.
Yes. Last year, there was that same kind of map showing the destruction of Gaza, and I know I was following them on WhatsApp, the work that they were doing to prepare for this day yesterday in Kitchener, the Palestine Land Day, and working on a new model to show the destruction. The other display that I saw them making, and I really wish that I could have gone in person, was the representation of the car that with all of the bullets and the destruction, where that little I think 5-year-old girl Hind Rajab was in, waiting. Her family had been killed by the Israeli snipers and tank, and she was alone in that car with dead family members, and then a ambulance was sent to get her, and then it was just destroyed, and the ambulance paramedics were killed by Israel, and then she eventually was killed. Just an absolutely tragic story, and this is an example of the war crimes that Israel is committing, and we're not hearing the condemnation that we should be from Canada. And we also haven't been hearing the condemnation from our universities. This is something that I'm very concerned about as a Canadian PhD student, that we're not even having real discussions at the universities about what's going on in the Middle East, what the illegal airstrikes by the United States and Israel against a sovereign country, against Iran, against nuclear facilities that could risk a nuclear escalation. There's been no condemnation by the universities or any kind of public discussion about that. There's also been no public events or condemnation for what Israel is doing to Palestine from the universities.
When there are protests at the universities, they get shut down by the university administration.
That's right, and I have participated in many of the protests at the universities exactly on that. But by contrast, the universities did issue statements within a couple of weeks after Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. So we need to ask ourselves critically, why are our universities so quick to condemn Russia for what it did in Ukraine, but we're silent on what the US and Israel did against Iran, and what Israel with the US and all of the other NATO countries are doing against the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. Something that baffles me every time I hear about it is Israel keeps bombing Lebanon. Why is this not an act of war?
So, Bob, I'm glad that you mentioned this, because people really need to understand what is going on in the broader Middle East and West Asia, and why Israel is bombing places like Lebanon and Syria and Iran and Yemen and the Palestinians. It is part of a larger strategy that is supported very much by the United States and NATO to crush all of the resistance in the Middle East to Israel, and also to China and Russia. So we have to see this as one of the fronts of a broader war. So Israel is acting as a proxy for the United States and NATO, and NATO has been very clear about this. So when Chancellor Merz from Germany was here in Canada for the G7 in Kananaskis, Alberta, he said in an interview that Israel is doing our dirty work. And the leader of the British Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, she also said in an interview on Sky News that Israel and Ukraine are proxies and are doing the dirty work of the West. So what is this dirty work? What is really going on? So they want to crush the resistance, the resistance in the Middle East. So crush Lebanon, Iran, Syria. They have got Syria now. They are destroying Palestine. They are not going to stop against Iran. This was just a first step to take out the nuclear weapons facilities. But one of the reasons is because they want to stop China's Belt and Road Initiative, and they also want to stop Russia from the south, because Russia and Iran and China and Iran are close partners. So we need to see this as a broader control of Eurasia. And this has been a plan for 30 years. So it's using Israel to control the south part of Eurasia, the Middle East, so crushing all of the resistance. And then we are using Ukraine in Europe along Russia's, along this, the West there. And trying to deplete and degrade Russia from that end, and then using Taiwan as another proxy against China. This is one of the reasons why we have been arming Taiwan with the other NATO allies, and why Canada continuously sends warships into the South China Sea with the British and the Americans, because we are planning a war against China.
That's the upshot of the whole thing then.
This is part of, we are at the beginning stage of a global war, and it is extremely dangerous, because we are talking about taking on nuclear armed states. Russia has the largest nuclear weapons in the world. China is also a nuclear armed state, and Israel has nuclear weapons. The United States has a lot. And so this is just so dangerous. And I'll just give a couple of clues. If people are thinking to themselves, oh, Tamara, you're exaggerating, this is hyperbole, talking about a global war. Well, we have to ask ourselves, why is Canada not bringing about a diplomatic solution to this war in Ukraine? Why are we continuing to escalate it? Why are we continuing to arm and fund Ukraine? What is really going on here? And why is Carney now talking about being in the coalition of the willing with the British and the French and the Europeans in this war in Ukraine? And then why, if you listen very carefully to what the Americans are saying, I encourage people to listen carefully to what the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State are saying about China, and how they are seeing China as a threat, and how they have built all of these American bases encircling Russia and China. What are we planning for? Why do we have rearm Europe? Why are we now going to be spending 5% of GDP on NATO? Canadians need to start asking critical questions, and our politicians should be asking what's going on. And then we should be calling for peace and saying no to this militarization, no to increase in military spending. We need to find ways to work collaboratively with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, all countries on the planet, because we are facing catastrophic climate change.
Yeah. In any sort of conflict, international conflict, domestic violence, even traffic tickets violations, that sort of thing, they're always settled through negotiation. It's always a negotiated effort to come to a settlement of some sort to stop the violence, to stop the escalation of attacks. So, knowing that this is the only way that this violence will ever stop, I don't understand how countries like Canada and the United States, Canada especially, are continuing to pour money into the escalation of violence rather than negotiated settlement.
Yes. So, two things. One is, people might ask themselves, why would we want to take on Russia and China and Iran and North Korea and Venezuela, Nicaragua? Why are these countries our supposed adversaries? Well, these are countries that are sovereign countries. They are not operating under the ambit of the United States. They have sovereign control over their natural resources, over their economies, and they want to keep it that way. So they do not want to have to follow the diktats of the United States and NATO in terms of how they run their economies, their politics, their arts and culture. And because they want autonomy and sovereignty over their countries, this is seen as a threat to the United States and to NATO. So NATO is 32 countries, Western countries of Europe, expanded. Canada, the United States, led by the United States. It's a military alliance. It's also a political alliance. But these 32 countries, they command 50% of the global economy and 50% of the world economy. And they want to keep it this way. This is a very unjust, discriminatory, unfair global order where the 32 NATO members led by the United States are on top and the rest of the countries are below and struggling for development. And what has been happening in the past 30 years is that Russia and China, because they have sovereign control over their economies, they've been able to rapidly develop. So the truth is that China in the past 25 years and Russia have lifted tens of millions of people out of poverty. They have been able to create these very dynamic economies that are seen they're more economically powerful, they're seen as threats to the United States. So the United States and NATO wants to keep these countries in their place and wants to crush them. So this is what the Ukraine war is all about. They're trying to deplete Russia, because do you know what Putin did in 2000, when he came in 2000, Putin nationalized some of the oil and gas and mineral resources in the country, taking them away from Western interests, and he established a sovereign wealth fund. It was about $300 billion. Russia has very low debt, and he's turned around his economy. You can see it. I've been to Russia twice in the past 2 years. I was astounded by what I saw. It was incredible. And
so this Western impression that I have of bread lines around the block are not anywhere close to accurate.
Well, I also had very negative and naive impressions about Russia before I went. I went to see for myself. Actually, I was compelled to go to Russia in November of 2022 after I was at the climate summit in Egypt. And I went because I was so angry that my university refused to have a Russian voice to explain the Russian position on the war in Ukraine. We are an academic institution. We should be listening to all voices. We should be understanding conflicts in their complexity. And because my institution refused to have a Russian voice, I decided when I was in Egypt, because I could get a direct flight from Cairo to Moscow, I'm going to go to this country for my first time and see and meet the so-called enemy. I knew nobody there. I had no contacts, but I had reached out to one of the universities. I said, I'm a PhD student. I would love to meet with you and find out your position about this conflict. And MIGIMO University, Moscow State University, the top university in international relations in the country, said, yes, you can come meet the faculty and students and we can have a discussion. And I was astounded by what I saw in Russia. I couldn't believe it. And then I ended up doing a 1-month tour. I went Russia, Finland, Latvia, Poland, and Romania. I talked to people about NATO expansion, the war in Ukraine, possibilities of peace building in the region, and I learned a lot about what's going on there. And my impression of Russia was very much challenged. All of the negative assumptions that I had were wrong. The people are very nice. There has been mass investment to improve living conditions, to modernize the cities. They have high-speed rail from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and Canada and the United States don't have 1 kilometer of high-speed rail. They have incredible, cheap, high-speed rail with beautiful gourmet food that you can take from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and I did. It was incredible. I would encourage everybody to go to Russia and to China as a way for peace building, because we cannot be in a long global war with these countries. If we care about climate change, we care about children and youth, the best thing is to peace build, to end these conflicts and find ways that we can live cooperatively together on this shared planet.
You said you went around Finland and the Latvia and Lithuania, Poland, Romania. Romania and Finland have recently joined NATO, haven't they?
Yes, they have. So Finland and Sweden just joined NATO, and I have many friends in Finland and Sweden, and they will tell you that they believe that these were coups by the political elite, and this was maneuvering by NATO for many years with the political elite in those countries to get them to join NATO. So there wasn't a public referendum. There wasn't a honest public debate about joining NATO. There's still very much opposition in the country. There was this new initiative started about 3 years ago called Global Women United Against NATO. It's being led by Finnish women, and so the people of these countries, of Sweden and Finland, they're very close to Russia. Finland shares a border with with Russia. There was trains going 4 times a day between Helsinki and St. Petersburg. There are many family and friend connections between Finland and Russia. This is a manufactured a conflict that, by the political elite that are very close to the American elite. This is not in the best interest of the people of Finland or Russia to have this new enmity and to have these borders between the countries. This is not right.
Especially from what I understand is that Putin has said that he's fighting in Ukraine to stop the advancement of NATO. And we've just seen the advancement of NATO coming closer to the Russian border.
It's more than that. It's more than that. Now listen, I have been investigating this war in Ukraine very extensively since NATO announced in 2008 in Bucharest that Ukraine and Georgia would join NATO. So I have gone to the Clinton archives in Little Rock, Arkansas to see the records. These are not public records about NATO, the plans for NATO expansion in the 1990s. They were planning this since the 1990s. I have filed 100 access to information. I have, like I said, I did a fact-finding mission. I talked to Ukrainian refugees in Poland. And I've talked to many of and I am very close to the Ukrainian diaspora in Canada and some key Ukrainian scholars like Dr. Ivan Kachanovsky. I have records from inside the Canadian government that shows that Canada and the United States were arming and training neo-Nazis in Ukraine since 2014 to shoot and shell into the Donbass. This is the eastern southern region of Ukraine where there was Russian-speaking Ukrainian minority, shooting and shelling them since the coup of February 2014 in order to provoke a civil conflict, because the Americans and NATO knew that the Russians would be drawn in to try to defend the Russian speaking population there. And then just to say, people might ask, well, why did Russia invade on February 22nd, February 24th, 2022? Why did Russia invade then? Well, if you look at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, they had a Ukrainian special monitoring mission operating in Ukraine. They showed that in the days before Russia invaded, the shooting and shelling from the NATO-backed Ukrainian neo-Nazi security forces into the Donbass had escalated. Thousands and thousands of ceasefire violations. So the people of the Lugansk and the Donetsk in the Donbass, those people called for Russia's help. The leaders went to Moscow. They invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter, self-determination, self-defense. Russia came in to help them fight back the Ukrainian neo-Nazis. And then I'll just say that there are many Ukrainians that actually have crossed over that are fighting alongside the Russians, because they do not support this Zelensky regime that is surrounded by neo-Nazis. Now, like I said, I have the documents. And so this is why I can confidently say that. And this is why Canada, for instance, we cheered for a Nazi collaborator in our parliament of September of 2023. There are links between Canada's support for this Ukrainian fascism, arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and supporting a Nazi collaborator in Parliament. So Canadians need to ask more questions about what's really going on in this war.
We did see that in the mainstream press. Just before the fighting broke out in 2022, there was some mainstream press on the Canadian-funded Nazi soldiers in Ukraine. That's gone from the mainstream press completely. We don't see any mention of that any longer.
Absolutely. The BBC, Sky News, even the CBC we're asking critical questions about 10 years ago about the conflict in Ukraine, about why there were, what really happened on the Maidan, the deaths that we saw in the protests in February of 2014. There were questions that were being asked then. We need to continue to ask those questions, and Canadians need to call for an end to this war in Ukraine. Sadly, our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, just announced another $2 billion to prolong this war in Ukraine. Canadians have spent already $19 billion for weapons and financial military assistance to Ukraine. We haven't sent $1 for peace. We haven't sent any diplomats to try to resolve it. So Canadians, again, need to question what's really going on here. Now, imagine if we had spent $19 billion in housing, schools, healthcare, public transit. Just down from your studio, we have this big tent encampment. All across Canada, there are tent encampments. More Canadians are going to food banks because of inflation. That is directly a result from this war. Inflation is a result from increase to military spending. And now we are going to increase our military spending even more. So Canadians need to say an end to war, an end to this militarism. We want peace.
How can we help? I'm looking at the Canadian Voice of Women. What can you tell me about that?
So there are lots of ways to get involved. I'm a member of the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. I'm also a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Canada. We've got websites that people can check out, vowpeace.org and wilfcanada.ca. We have an event coming up on July 19th called Steeped in Peace, a feminist gathering to talk about peace and disarmament. And we are also going to be marking at the Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto on August 6th, the 80th anniversary, the commemoration of the U.S. bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, calling for an end to nuclear weapons, an end to war, an end to the F-35s, which is a nuclear warplane, on August 6th. So that information is on our website, and people can also check out the Canada Peace and Justice Network and also the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute. We have great e-news that people can join to follow our work, to get involved, and to sign action alerts.
Okay. The hour's up. Can you imagine? Talking to Tamara Lorincz, we didn't even get into the issues of climate change. We'll have to come back and do that again.
Absolutely. Let's talk about climate next time. I'm also very involved in that.
Exactly. You've been listening to CKMS Community Connections for Monday, the 14th of July, 2025. My name is Bob Jonkman. CKMS Community Connections is produced by Jennifer Strong. She's the executive producer. We air every Monday at 11 o'clock, alternate Fridays at 3 p.m. And I guess we'll be back next week. Not with Tamara necessarily, but I think Tamara will be coming back to talk about climate. Thank you so much, Tamara.
Thanks for having me, Bob.